The Atlanta Braves want to add a starter this winter. Could it be Zac Gallen or Dylan Cease? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, October 8th. Your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. You can also find all my written work, bravestoday.com. This is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. A lot of offers out there right now for new customers to FanDuel, so download the app today. We heard Alex Anthopoulos. I played the clip for you on Monday. Rotation is absolutely front burner for the Braves. They want to add somebody. And I'm inclined to believe, for a couple different reasons, we'll talk about it in the third segment, that the best route to go might be a shorter term deal. Okay. So let's talk about two of the guys who are not widely, but are more likely to take a short-term deal in Dylan Cease and Zac Gallen over guys who might try to take some sort of longer-term deal like a Framber Valdez or a Michael King. So I want to start with Dylan Cease because there's a lot of reasons here why Atlanta has been interested in Dylan Cease for a couple seasons now, and there were some whispers, none of them were confirmed, that Atlanta tried to trade for Dylan Cease back when he was with the White Sox. One, he's from Milton, Georgia. So, he went to high school in Georgia, somewhat close, relatively close to Atlanta, relatively speaking. Milton is north of Roswell, so north of Sandy Springs. And it's kind of between Lake Lanier and Cartersville, Woodstock kind of thing. That's where Milton is. It's suburban Atlanta. It's part of Metro Atlanta. So, local boy. You've got that going for you, which is nice. And in his career, he's been a pretty good pitcher. He led the American League in WAR in 2022 at 6.4. He was the runner-up for the Cy Young that year with a 2.20 ERA and 22nd place in MVP voting. He also had a complete game shutout. He has 3 of those in his career. And he's led either his league or all of baseball in starts 3 of the last 5 years. We talked about all the injuries the Braves have had, right? All 5 opening day starters were on the 60-day IL. Dylan Cease has made either 32 or 33 starts in 5 consecutive seasons, pitching anywhere from 165 2/3 innings to 189 innings in that stretch. 5 consecutive years of qualifying for the ERA title and being a very good, first year in San Diego. 4th place finisher in the NL Cy Young with a 3.47 ERA. Now this year, he did struggle a bit. And so that's part of the reason why some of the thought, especially given the fact that both these guys are rep by Scott Boras, which hopefully you sign Ha-Sung Kim and you're totally on board with doing business with Boras and he likes you. Part of the reason why people think that he might end up taking a 1-year deal with an option or something on it to try to rebuild his value before he re-enters free agency for a long-term deal is because this season for the Padres, he had an ERA of 4.55. So 168 innings, another year of qualifying for the ERA title, right? But just not really the platform season you would want. On Baseball Reference, so BWAR, he went from 4.1 WAR in 2024, and I know their version of WAR is not exact, to 1.1 WAR this most recent season. The flip side of that, and no, I don't understand how this works. The flip side of that is Fangraphs has him at something nuts like 3 WAR. I don't know how you have a difference of over 2 between the Fangraphs calculation and the Baseball Reference calculation. I'm not smart enough to understand how they calculate WAR. But when you look at the stuff, you can see where some of this was some bad luck. Some of this was a little bit of slippage and a couple small things. His fastball, highest average velocity it's ever had, 97 1/3 miles an hour. The stuff plus on the fastball went up to 104. The slider, conversely, took a minor step down to 115. It was 121. Still absurdly good. If you can get to like 110, that's a full standard deviation above a normal pitch. Like it's still elite, mind you, but it was even better. His knuckle curve is down to like a 92. So the extra velocity is making his fastball, it's helping his fastball out, but it's not doing a lot for the other pitches. And I do think one of the paths to getting Dylan Cease back to what he needs to be is that slider and the velocity on it. So I'm kind of fond of saying it's hard to have a gyro slider that's bad, that's over 85 miles an hour. And that's still fundamentally true. But the change in Dylan Cease's specific slider from when he used to throw it like 87 to when he started throwing it now, it averaged 89 and change this year. He added 2 full mile an hour to his slider to go along with that career best 97 miles an hour on his four-seam fastball. The difference here is he's lost a noticeable amount of drop on the pitch, going backwards. And the reason this is important, I kind of did this out of order. The reason this is important is he is like 40% four-seam, 40% slider. And whether you're a lefty or a righty, you're getting predominantly those two pitches. Now, lefties get more fastballs than sliders. Righties get more sliders than fastballs. But he's throwing you these two pitches, most combining for 80% of the time. So that's why the slider is so important here. With the extra velocity on the slider, Dylan Cease lost some movement to it. So back to some of the best years of the slider, it was, it's confusing if you look at a slider, a breaking ball on an induced vertical break perspective, but it went from negative 1.1 to positive 3.3. In total movement, so take out the gravity, take out the adjusting for gravity. In total movement, it went from like 38 inches of drop to 31 inches of drop, which is a significant difference. That's half a foot. And so what that did was the slider ends up being in the zone a little bit more than it used to. And it's a little bit harder for him to miss bats with it than it used to be. And you can kind of go and you can isolate some of the individual whiff rates. You know, the slider used to sit around 27 or so percent. Going back to 2022, that big year for the slider, it sat 27.8% and opponents 27% put away rate, 43% whiff rate. Opponents hit 128 with a 209 slug off the slider, okay? In 2025, they hit 228 with a 374 slug. Still not a massive difference, but he still allowed 8 home runs on the pitch, and it's a lot more balls in play. It's a lot more extra base hits, all that kind of stuff, right? Like in 2022, he allowed 5 doubles on the slider. Last year, 17. So yes, the velo's useful, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when I tell you which one I want over the other. So yes, the velo's useful, but it looks like in Dylan Cease's case, it's actually hurting the slider a little bit. And there needs to be some sort of like mental cue to back off just a little bit. There is a little bad luck here as well, and that comes up. His expected ERA in StatCast was a 3.47, which, reminder, his actual ERA was 4.55. His actual ERA last year was right in the same place that expected ERA is, right? Again, expected this year of 347, actual last year of 347. He pitched roughly the exact same from a from an inputs perspective when you look at what the expected ERA was this year versus the actual ERA this year, but some underperformance, some bad luck, some well-timed opponent hits, things like that. His ERA ends up being 4.5. I don't think he would be cheap. I think we need to understand everybody we're talking about here is going to be $20+ million. But I do think there is a world where you can get Dylan Cease for something like $22 to $25 million a year on a 1 or 2 year deal. And again, Boris is his agent. Maybe you need to, maybe he wants the second year to be a player option and you have to meet him in the middle somewhere on that. Atlanta doesn't like player options. They don't like vesting options. Nobody likes mutual options. They're dumb. Don't do them. Atlanta likes club options. Maybe you meet in the middle and you do the vesting option. Hey, if Cease can stay healthy and he can cover this many innings or this many starts or whatever, then the option automatically vests, or he has the option to decline it or whatever. Work out some sort of structure. But I feel like you could get Dylan Cease on a pillow type deal where he has the flexibility to have a good season, build a free agent case for a long-term deal. And if it worked out for everybody and he just loved it in Atlanta, maybe you're the one who signs him to that deal. Who knows? If not, maybe you probably won't tag him with a qualifying offer because he probably has a qualifying offer from the Padres this winter. And that's the real problem, is you lose a draft pick by signing a guy to a short-term deal with a qualifying offer. I was going to get to that in the third segment. I didn't mean to bring it up here. In just a minute, let's talk about, by contrast, Zac Gallen. Where is Zac Gallen in this conversation? Could it be cheaper? Is there a better likelihood to get the performance out of him? We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. There's no better place to get in on the action right now than FanDuel. It can be NFL, it can be MLB, lots of different ways to play. I've built parlays, I've tried player props, I follow the live lines during games. I'm really enjoying watching Philly's numbers continuously tick down and down and down and down and down. That is a little bit of fun to me. Today's action, Brewers at Cubs. Brewers are favored by a 1.5. Quinn Priester versus Jameson Taillon. And then the nightcap is Aaron Nola versus Yoshinobu Yamamoto in LA. Dodgers are favored by a 1.5. I absolutely expect this is the final game of the season for Philly, and they are eliminated tonight. Nobody's beat the Dodgers in the playoffs yet. I don't see Philly taking one in LA when they couldn't take two in the big, scary Citizens Bank Park. So, if you are ready to give it a shot, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby, kind of breaking down, talked about Dylan Cease, right? Why he might take a short-term pillow deal at a high AAV, $25 million or so, instead of holding out for a long-term deal. Let's do the same thing for Zac Gallen of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And his case is really even like a little bit more straightforward than Dylan Cease's is. Because Zac Gallen's season was, frankly, bad, right? He was 13-15 with a 4.83 ERA. He set career worst marks in losses with those 15, in the ERA at the 4.83, home runs allowed with 31. His previous best was only 22, and a lot of those were solo shots, if I remember right. And strikeout rate down to just 21.5%. And just context there, MLB average is 22.7%. He's been above 26% for every year of his career until 24. And then in 25, he dropped to below average. So he is down from his career norms. He's down like 4 or 5% in strikeout rate from his career numbers. And kind of similar to Dylan Cease, a scenario where his fastball stuff plus readings got better. Everything else either went down or was within 1 point of where it was last year. And similar to Dylan Cease, I guess no, not similar to Dylan Cease. He has 6 pitches, but he throws 3 of them more than 15% of the time. So fastball, knuckle curve, changeup. 45% usage on the fastball, 23% on the curveball, 16% on the changeup. And the only pitch that really graded out that good for him this year was the changeup. It's the only pitch that had a positive run value on StatCast. He was really good at locating that down in the bottom corner of the zone. He was really good with that. The knuckle curve, he most often landed below the zone, while the four-seamer was in the strike zone a lot. It was a problem. Also throws a slider, throws a cutter, throws a sinker. Not a ton of those, like 2.5% sinkers, 5.8% cutters. He's not really fully bought into the concept of I need to throw all 3 fastballs to try and hide my not good four-seamer. His season low on the four-seamer was like 25% in early August. And even there, he threw the sinker some, but like the cutter was like 3% usage. Like he can't really, there was like 2 or 3 starts where he ramped up the sinker and cut back on the four-seamer. And then he went back to the normal ways of just throwing a ton of four-seamers and not really throwing a lot or any cutters at all, right? So a little bit of adjustment. And the issue here is the four-seam fastball for Zac Gallen is decidedly below average. 93.5 miles an hour. MLB average for a right-handed pitcher is 95. MLB average for a right-handed starting pitcher is like 94 and change. And so he has below average fastball velocity, and he's never been a really hard thrower. It's not like he all of a sudden decided to stop throwing hard, but he's not always been averaging, like he's been as high as 94 before. So he's kind of in the same range. The movement profile is kind of similar. The stuff plus number, it ticked up, like I said, just a little bit. Some of that may just be the overall readjustment of everything year to year in stuff plus, because it's based off of your entire arsenal and it's based off of what the league throws, right? So it's always going to adjust just a little bit. But he's really got to figure out what's going to happen here. And back up a little bit. The fastball velocity did tick up a little bit late in the year. The issue here ends up being he doesn't really miss bats that much with anything other than the knuckle curve and the changeup. Changeup's like 30% whiff rate, knuckle curve's like 39%, and nothing else is reliably missing bats. He gave up 11 home runs on the four-seamer. It was a .413 slug. And when they made contact with the knuckle curve, they did a pretty good job of launching it. 9 homers on the knuckle curve, too. So he's getting a bunch of whiffs on that. Again, 38.9%, highest whiff rate of any pitch of his. But also, when they got it, it was obliterated. So he's in this weird place of he doesn't have the velocity for the fastball to survive. The whiff rate on the fastball is down to like 13%, which is pretty poor. He's been, in his career, he's been like 19%. 1 in every 5 swings on the fastball is missing. And now it's down to like 1 in every 6 or 7. Not great. And if I'm having to pick between these two guys, I really feel like this ends up being Dylan Cease for me. Even though he probably costs you more money. You can probably get, and Zac Gallen's also a Scott Boras guy. You can probably get Zac Gallen on a smaller deal, right? You can probably get him, I don't know, $18, $20 million per year on the 1 or 2 year thing. Whatever the structure has to be on the second year to make Scott Boras okay with it. But you can probably get Zac Gallen on a shorter deal. shorter deal, on a cheaper deal. But I really kind of think that of these two, Dylan Cease is the one I would rather have. And there's a couple reasons there. I think the first one is just he's a local kid. He's more likely to be the kind of guy that would want to play for the Braves and then extend. Zac Gallen is from New Jersey. Now, he went to college at UNC, Chapel Hill. So it's possible, he feels like he's a little bit of a Southern guy. But again, he's from New Jersey, drafted by the Cardinals, ended up playing for the Diamondbacks. I really don't, demographically, Dylan Cease is the kind of guy that wants to sign an extension in Atlanta. Zac Gallen, you don't know. But I think the other reason, and there's been some new research on this that came out, literally, I'm pretty sure it was on Tuesday morning when I first saw it, about career longevity makes me lean a lot more towards Dylan Cease. We'll talk about that, and then if Atlanta would even do one of these deals. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Third and final segment of Braves Today here on Wednesday the 8th. Lindsay Crosby here with you. Okay, so when I'm deciding between Dylan Cease and Zac Gallen, I want Cease. And the reason for that, this goes back to something that J.J. Cooper, the editor-in-chief of Baseball America, wrote and dropped on Tuesday. The title of the piece is called, "To Have a Lengthy MLB Career, Pitchers Need to Throw Hard." He did a bunch of research, and talked to the guy, met the guy. I trust him on this. Fastball velocity, four-seam fastball velocity, is the single most important determining characteristic for success for a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. Your velocity, and specifically where your velocity is in relation to the league average velocity, matters more so than just about anything else. And you have more longevity when you throw hard. And that, the first thing you think about is, injury. Let me explain what he's referring to in the piece. If you have a Baseball America subscription, I can't recommend enough going to read this article. It is fantastic. But what he's so he acknowledges in the piece, we have the research now that shows the harder you throw, the more likely you are to suffer a UCL injury. You're putting stress on the elbow every time you throw a baseball. The harder you throw it, the more stress, the more likely you are to blow out. The odds of a guy who throws hard having an elbow injury and blowing out are still significantly lower than the odds of a low velocity guy washing out of the league due to ineffectiveness. The harder you throw, and specifically in relation to the average fastball velocity of the league, the harder you throw, the more likely you are to hit just about every single threshold of longevity, right? The more likely you are to reach 200 career innings, the more likely you are to reach 500, to reach 1,000. They pulled a giant data set from the entire time that StatCast has had pitch tracking. So, very long time. And starting kind of low. If you debut throwing 2 or more miles an hour softer than the average fastball velocity, you have historically, 40% of those guys have even reached 200 career innings as a starter. Okay? And you can go up when you hit a mile an hour below average velocity, it's 62.9%. If you get to 2 miles an hour above average, it's 91.9% likely to throw 200 innings. And if you exceed 2 mile an hour harder than average when you debut, compared to the average fastball velocity that season, you are 94% likely to reach 200 innings. So you go from 40% chance to 95% chance with a 4 mile an hour difference in there. He did this for 500. He did this for 1,000. It is consistently clear no matter how many innings you put on there as a standard. If you debut throwing harder than MLB average, you are more likely to stick around in the league. And the big thing here to think about with this is the average fastball velocity in Major League Baseball is going up just about every single full-length season. 2020 did some weird stuff to fastball velocities, but outside of that, it's going up every single year. And so if you enter the league throwing, let's say, 3 mile an hour harder than average, you have a good bit of runway before the league catches up to where you are, assuming you don't continue to build velocity. But if you enter the league below average, or even just if you enter the league at average, within 1 or 2 years, you're now below average in velocity, unless you continue to build velocity too. And so if I'm looking at which of these guys do I want Atlanta to bring in on a 1-year deal, with the understanding that the way Alex Anthopoulos works, he may try to sign this guy to an extension, I would rather pay more for Dylan Cease now, knowing that if we extend him, it's a lot more likely he is an above average MLB pitcher for the length of that deal than signing Zac Gallen to a 1-year deal with a possible extension there. Because Zac Gallen's velocity on his fastball is already below MLB average, whereas Cease's is still above average, even with the average going up in recent seasons. He's continuing to build velocity. Again, this was his highest average fastball velocity of his career. And while he needs to back off a little bit on the slider velocity, it is proven with numbers, the harder you throw your fastball, the harder it is to hit. And on average, even controlling for location and all of that stuff, you may throw 1.5% less strikes if you add a mile an hour of velocity or whatever. I don't know the exact number. That's just a random number. But you will still perform better with that extra velocity, even though you're throwing slightly less strikes. Because the harder you throw it, the harder it is to hit. As much as some people don't want to admit that, the harder you throw a baseball, the harder it is to hit. And it's just the modern game is not built for dudes who throw 89, 90 miles an hour. It's not. And the problem here, and the reason why on the YouTube, the last question there, will the Braves even sign a free agent starter? Is because when you look at Atlanta's draft history, you look at some of what they do when they claim guys and they try to convert them to the rotation. Grant Holmes is a great example here. When they sign guys like Ronaldo Lopez, when they draft guys, Atlanta's begun prioritizing velocity or the potential to build velocity. And when you get past Dylan Cease in this free agent market, there are a lot of guys who are throwing pretty soft. Ranger Suarez, lefty. A lot of people have been saying, like, he kills us. Bring him in. He averaged 90.5 miles an hour on his sinker this year. Chris Bassett of the Blue Jays, 91.5. Shane Bieber, 92.6. Brandon Woodruff of the Brewers, 93. Framber Valdez is right around average. He's 94.2. That's actually above average for a lefty. But there's just not a lot of velocity on the free agent market. There's just not a lot of velocity in the starting free agent market this year outside of Dylan Cease. And so I'm kind of at the point of, if you don't sign Dylan Cease to a short-term deal with an attempt to extend him, or just to sign the longer-term deal, which would be out of character for Atlanta. I do need to remind everybody, the biggest free agent deal Atlanta has signed was 4 years, $65 million from Marcell Ozuna. And he wasn't a true free agent because he had been here the season before, the 2020 season before. The largest true free agent deal AA has given anybody since he's been in Atlanta was 3 years, $30 million to Ronaldo Lopez. So it's unlikely you're going to sign Dylan Cease to that long-term deal. And I had somebody one day I was talking with who was saying if you do sign another starter to a long-term deal, you're starting to block some of these prospects you have coming up. Well, I push back on that a little bit. I think you have plenty of runway here, right? Plenty of runway. Look how many pitchers you use this year. Even in a normal year, you're using 13, 15 starters. You can find room for the prospects to come up, especially if Atlanta gets a little more aggressive with moving guys to the pen to give them experience in the majors before putting them back in the rotation the next season. But if you don't sign Dylan Cease, knowing that they've started to prioritize velocity a little bit, it feels like you're going to have to make a trade. And even the trade market, Pablo Lopez, Twins, they're also going to move Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. Joe Ryan, I think it's Joe Ryan's one of those weird, rare guys that doesn't throw super hard, but he gets the results on his four-seam fastball because of all of the extra stuff he does, the vertical approach angle, all of that stuff. He's throwing 93.6, but it's one of the best fastballs in baseball because of the other stuff. We talked about with Hayden Harris, the vertical approach angle. Same thing for Joe Ryan, the induced vertical break, all that stuff he gets. But there's a lot of, you may be trading for somebody. Do you trade for Mitch Keller? Do you trade for Brady Singer, Shane Baz, Luis Severino? Sandy Alcantara and Mackenzie Gore could potentially be available this winter. I think Alcantara is moved. Gore may or may not be moved. I don't think you see a trade in the division. I don't think Peter Bendix wants to send Alcantara to the Braves. I don't think the new guy in Washington, Paul Taboni, I don't think he wants to move Mackenzie Gore to the Braves. But, maybe you do something. So, Sonny Gray's out there. He's not a hard tosser either, but it's also not a long-term deal. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to add a starter. They've said they want to add a starter. I'm really curious to know who it is because there's a lot of reasons to not like the breakdown of how much it's going to cost to pay that guy versus the highest and best use you're going to get of that guy. Is it worth paying Zac Gallen $20 million to be a number 4 or 5 starter? I don't think it is. But if you pay Dylan Cease $25 million to maybe be a number 2 pitcher quality, you can find more value there. So really curious to see what happens this year. Let me know if you can pick one starter from the free agent market. Who are you adding to the Braves? And I'll assume it's a short-term deal, right? Because that's what Atlanta's done. They haven't wanted to go long on pitchers outside of the extension that they did for Spencer Strider. So assuming it's a 1 or 2 year deal. Do you want Dylan Cease? You want Zac Gallen? Do you want somebody else? I'd love to, Michael King. I'd love to know what you think. I'm on social media at Crosby Baseball. Heck, you can email us, contact@bravestoday.com. Do me a favor, if you're listening on audio, leave a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below, even if it's just the word comment. Helps share the show in the algorithm on YouTube and grow it to more people. Hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode. We will be back tomorrow. There's no episode on Friday or Monday. Reminder, I'm having heart surgery on Friday, so no episode on Friday or Monday, but there'll be an episode on Thursday. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.